Hello there again. Today I'm going to be talking about the supporting structures of the maxillary denture. The supporting structures are basically the structures that support the denture. They can be either relief areas, retentive areas which give retention, or they could be stress bearing areas. So we have the residual ridge, the incisive papilla, the Rugae area, mid-palatine Raphe, hard palate, soft palate, tuberosity, which is the maxillary tuberosity, the zygomatic process or the malar process, and torus palatinus. So of these 9 different parts of the maxilla, which are almost all of the landmarks of the maxilla, so basically this video is also explaining the landmarks of the maxilla. Anyway, so how do we distinguish whether which area is for relief and which area is for stress bearing? So we have 3 main factors, you could say, which determine whether the structure should be given relief or whether it can be used as a stress bearing area. The number 1 is bone, the second one is mucosa, and the third one is force or forces, occlusal forces. For bone, we may have spongy or cancellous bone or compact bone. If we have compact bone, which is a pretty strong bone because it gives better support, because it has its osteons arranged in a really compact manner, so it has more resilience, so that's why it gives better support. So usually stress bearing areas have a compact bone, and the spongy or cancellous bone is usually soft, and it's really not so good for bearing stresses. So that these are 2 types of bones which could be on those areas. When we talk about the mucosa, we have bearing areas, but I think this is a bit confusing. The basic thing you have to see is whether it is loosely attached or firmly attached. And in forces, we consider if you have 90-degree vertical forces or occlusal forces, then it's your primary stress bearing area. And if you have forces which are other than the 90-degree, which could be lateral forces, then that becomes our secondary stress bearing area. So now it is our residual alveolar ridge. As you can see over here, this is basically our secondary stress bearing area. And why is that? Because it has obviously the compact type bone and not the spongy bone. Also, it does not have a 90-degree occlusal forces. It has other forces acting on it. It also is covered with a fibrous connective tissue layer, and which is firmly attached to the bone, so that's why it can be used as a secondary stress bearing area. This is your residual alveolar ridge. As you can see, this is our what? It is our secondary stress bearing area. The rugae are certain prominences, bony prominences, present just on the anterior part of our hard palate. As you can see over here, these markings in black, and I'll show you another one. Yep, these are really prominent over here. These must be recorded without pressure, because if we put too much pressure on it, we won't be able to record the exact shapes of these. So we need exact shapes because we need some sort of retention to grasp it. We need the denture to fit on it so it can resist the forward and the backward movement of the denture. Moving on to the third structure, which is the median palatine raphe. The median palatine raphe is this line in the middle. This is your median palatine raphe. Now, what is this? It is not a stress-bearing area. It is a relief area because you need to provide it relief because it's a raised bony edge basically along the midline of the hard palate. And if you put pressure on this area, if the denture gives any sort of pressure on this part, then it can lead to soreness and it can lead to pain as well as ulcers. So we don't need that. So this is our relief area. And it also acts as a fulcrum point, which causes the rocking of the denture if you're not relieving it adequately. This whole structure is the hard palate, the pink region. And basically the hard palate is divided into two parts, anterolateral and posterolateral. Anterolateral is the anterior area, which is mostly the rugae, the area beneath the rugae, and the posterolateral area is the area more posterior to it, which has the fovea palatina as well. So this is your hard palate, and this is the anterolateral hard palate, and this part can be your posterolateral hard palate. Now the posterolateral hard palate, this area is a primary stress-bearing area. Why? Again, because of those three factors. What are those three factors? The mucosa, which is firmly attached, and the bone, which is compact bone, as well as the third factor, which are the forces. Here we get 90-degree occlusal forces load, and that's why it has all three factors, and so it is a primary stress-bearing area for us. So the fifth is our incisive papilla. What is the incisive papilla? It is basically a small tissue projection over the incisive foramen, right about here, behind our central incisors in the dentulous mouth. This papilla, this soft tissue, it covers the incisive foramen, which is a hole basically through which our nasopalatine nerves and vessels pass. So obviously this is a really delicate area and it needs to be given relief. So it's a relief area. If you apply pressure on this area, or if the denture applies pressure on this area, then the patient could come with the complaint of burning sensations or pain, soreness, or even paresthesia. Why? Because if you apply pressure, then the nerves and the vessels passing through that foramen get compressed, and so they don't function well. So obviously the sensations are lost. So this area is a relief area. Next one is the zygomatic process or the malar process. This is basically a small part of it is near the is located buccal to the first molar region, right over here behind the slope, but you can't actually identify it on this model. It's usually felt with the fingers in the patient's mouth. And this part is also given relief, because if you're not giving relief to this part, then it will obviously lead to some soreness and ulcers even. Then after that comes our maxillary tuberosity, which is quite evident over here in the you can see the yellow region. That is the maxillary tuberosity. It is the posterior most part of the maxillary edentulous ridge, and sometimes it can be really large and really prominent, especially if the patient is quite old, and that leads it to cause problems for the dentures. So sometimes it has to be surgically reduced. So yeah, that's basically it. Other than that, we have the soft palate, which is not covered in a maxillary denture, and we have the torus palatinus, which I haven't discussed over here in detail. So that is all. Look at the landmarks once again. The fovea palatina, the mid-palatine Raphe and the Rugae, and the maxillary tuberosity, the slopes, the incisive papilla, as well as the alveolar ridge. You can also see the labial frenum over there. Could you see that? The labial frenum over here, marked in black. And that's it. Thank you for watching.